So our next speaker is Dr. Flavia Santos. So Flavia Santos is a lecturer at the University College London, Institute of Education, Faculty of Education and Society, and the Department of Psychology and Human Development. So she earned her PhD at the Federal University of Sao Paulo. Amongst other positions and honors, Dr. Santos serves as chair of the MCLS Mathematical Cognition and Learning Society, and she is an awardee of the prestigious Ad Astra Fellowship at the University College Dublin, Ireland. So Flavia,
thank you so much. Thank you. And good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here again. It's a really real privilege. So let's get started. Of course, thank you for Naya for the invitation as well and all the organization of this event. So thank you very much. Okay, now it's this. Okay. Never mind. Okay, it has to be this way. Okay, so I organized this talk in 3 parts. So the first one is why should we be concerned about math anxiety? The second part is about some historical facts that are very related to the context of this event in particular. And then I will just explore a little bit some critical factors shaping math anxiety research in our community. So before I start, I need to do some caveats because I think that's important. First of all, I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a mathematics educator, and I'm not a historian. So I'll be talking about things that are not my field, but I will bring to you my perspective as a cognitive neuroscientist. So I think it also would be useful. I also would like to say that Blackness is a universe. So it's not just the color of your skin or the texture of your hair. It's in context of time, where you are living, the country, the culture that you are experiencing. So it's not the same to be a Black person in Brazil or being a Black person in the United States or South Africa. So that's an important aspect. When we say Black, it's hard to say which Black we are talking about, so bear it in mind. That's why I chose in my title the word community, because, you know, it's like everyone, but with some particularities. And I also want to say that we know that it's not just about ethnicity. We have other factors influencing this process, lots of inequities, and all the experiences of being minoritized, they will also be shared by other communities. And then those factors will be influencing the way we see those results that I'm showing here. And finally, most of my examples will be from the US, just for the fact that there are more publications presenting data that we are interested in for this context. And I hope this also is an encouragement for other countries, other researchers across the globe to also produce data in this direction. So why should math anxiety be a concern for all of us? So first of all, just a concept. So math anxiety is a feeling of tension and apprehension when dealing with numbers or symbols or quantities. It will, of course, be seen in the classroom first, but it's present in any other activities that the child is doing. So buy an ice cream and get worried how to get the change and things like this. An important aspect I want to mention here is that this feeling of tension or apprehension is weakly correlated to intelligence. So when you see a teacher or a parent saying, oh, I'm worried because my child is not doing well in mathematics, what they are actually thinking is maybe my child is not so smart, and that's completely a mistake because that's not the truth. And also, once you created this mindset, your attitude towards the child will influence the way the child sees themselves. So it's very important to be taken care of. The other part is that math anxiety is fitting all elements for meeting criteria for specific phobia. So in technical words, would be similar to talk about fear of spiders, the same kind of approach. And that leads me to one point, which is at the moment, mathematics anxiety is not on the medical manuals, but it might be a question of time. And that also leads to the idea that, okay, maybe the treatment should be pharmacological. When I'm here to remind you that, yes, you might have some cases that might need more specialized supports, but overall you have lots of cultural factors influencing the way this anxiety is developing. Why is this so, let's say, pervasive? So first of all, you have different dimensions. So for instance, physiological, like shaking, sweating, heart racing, butterflies in the stomach. So you have lots of physiological elements that are visible for the child. So that's why the child feels so the intensity of it. And then you have affective, which we could say that fear is the most common word, but we can also add here anger, contempt. Then you have cognitive. So the child, when a child is doing calculation, they are using their attention, their memory, and many other cognitive skills. But if the child is nervous, this child will be actually using all those mental resources to think about what if I do give the wrong response, if I don't know the answer, if I got a low grade, what if others will laugh at me? So instead of using their energy for producing maths, they are actually ruminating those feelings. And last is behavioral, which is perhaps the worst part, because in the behavior we can summarize with the word avoidance. And by avoidance means that the child is not doing or practicing mathematics as much as they should. So then in consequence, they will not produce good grades or good performance because they are not practicing. And this avoidance can be disguised in many ways, like the child that asks to go to the toilet all the time and it's not doing the exercises, or doing things very slowly. So when the class is finishing, they never reach those difficult items, or misbehaving. What is very popular, especially among teenagers now, procrastination. So yes, we have different elements. And then these four dimensions, they will appear in anticipation. So it might be a child that cannot sleep the night before an exam, just thinking of it. During the learning, so when the teacher are actually explaining mathematics for them, and they cannot just take the content. And of course, in assessments, which will lead to the classic blanking out and low grades and etc. that we all know. So far, mathematics anxiety is present regardless of gender, regardless of ethnicity, basically in all continents, and unfortunately in all grades, from first grade to post-secondary, for university students and so on. And as you can see, I circulated in red first graders, because if you're starting very early, not being able to enjoy mathematics, it will be harder to get this point later. So we are talking here about 5 years old, 6 years old children that cannot enjoy mathematics. So that's very important. Here I'm showing a plot of one of the most used scales to measure mathematics anxiety, which is AMAS. So in the horizontal axis, you're seeing the points. So small numbers like 5 points means low anxiety, and then if you have 50 points means high anxiety, okay? So what we see is the pattern that repeats in many different studies with adults, children, any other individuals. What you see is that you have lots of people with low levels of maths anxiety, as you can see on the left. And then on the right side, you see individuals after the dashed line, individuals with high levels of maths anxiety. The other interesting thing that we see on this other graph is that you have a distribution per gender, which is very interesting. So for individuals with low levels of maths anxiety, you see more boys showing this than girls. And then when you go to the other dashed line, you see that there are more girls with higher levels of maths anxiety than boys. So that's very important in terms of policy, because, we need to do something for the girls. And before you think that just cultural aspects are important in this matter. I want to show you that once you elicit the feeling of nervousness, it will have an impact on the way the brains are working. So in this study, they contrasted second and third graders. They were doing the fMRI study, and they could see that among those with higher levels of maths anxiety, they were activating more the right amygdala and the right hippocampus, as you can see at the top, circulated in color and marked in color orange. So those areas are important for a detection of fear or remembering previous experiences of fear. Okay. By contrast, the other group that had lower levels of maths anxiety, they were activating more the ventromedial prefrontal cortex and the left interparietal sulcus, which are circulated at the bottom in marked in the color green. So what it means is that, yes, they are actually using brain areas which are important for calculation. So indeed, individuals with anxiety will be activating different brain areas, and that's an important factor. I also brought here some recent studies which are doing something very nice. First of all, reporting stratified data, so per ethnicity or specific groups like Hispanic, Asian, Blacks, and Whites, also showing the percentage of girls. And you might be thinking, oh, that's obvious, but no, many studies in the past, they were not reporting those things. So this is important. And then what I found really striking in this study is that they could observe that line at the top, that this scale, so asking 9 questions about emotions related to mathematics, could predict arithmetic performance in those individuals. Okay, so this is important. Emotions can predict performance. And then this study goes in the same direction, but here the point is to show the issue with Black girls and Latin girls. So again, to show you this intersectionality, the importance of considering specific groups. So in this study, they were interested to see if the grade, if the first grade maths anxiety and attitudes towards maths could predict 4th grade scores. And as you can see, this pathway was not significant. So it means that attitudes, they influence, but they are not enough for producing outcomes. But then if you look at maths anxiety, then you see clearly that it was significant, but notice this. For girls was minus 0.40, the correlation, and for boys was minus 0.3 and non-significant. But for girls was significant. So it's indeed that, yes, you can predict the performance in the long term, and more specifically for girls. So this is very important. Again, we need action very early and targeting specific groups. Okay, so this was just to let you know why is this important. So now I would like to talk about historical facts that are relevant in the context of this conference today. So apparently humanity started in Africa, right? I think there's no disagreement on this. But also we know that some difficulties also started with this population. And I will just point a few moments in time. So of course, the slave trade. We know that several countries, particularly in West Africa, they had those individuals kidnapped and enslaved and brought to, coincidentally, South America, Central America, North America, and Europe, which means that this model was repeated basically in all continents, right? So they were there working in tobacco, coffee production, cotton, etc., until 1986, that they decided that slave trade was not good business and it was over. And when I was a child, in the books and in the classroom, the conversation was like, oh, that's great, freedom. That was the kind of message that we're listening. But it turns out that when I became an adult, I realized, well, actually, if you think in Brazil was in 1888, in the United States was 1865, and so on. So like we were saying, we're talking about a PhD of 100 years ago, and we are talking about slavery freedom in 137 years. So it's not far, it's not far. And what I realized is that actually those individuals, what they faced in all those continents is that they had no documents, they were far away from their families, they had no home, they had no training for professional or development skills, no education, most of them couldn't even read, of course, poor health, and also not even dominate the language, mastering the language that they were trying to use. So in that context that we are having a society that's trying to succeed nowadays, and it's not far away, remember, 136 years in Brazil. And then I would like to show you this. This was a study made by the youth OECD, and it plots several countries. In the center, the red diamond is the average of countries, and they are talking about intergenerational mobility. So what is this? This is the idea that you can estimate how many generations you need to make someone that's an offspring that's coming from low income to become average income. So as you can see, the average is 4 generations. So that would mean the grandfather, the father, the child, and the grandchild, okay? So that's the average. But you have here on the right side, some nations like Brazil that had slavery, or South Africa that had apartheid, and Colombia with other issues. What you see, that it takes 8 to 10 generations. So it's really hard, okay? Then I found this letter by Alexander Clark, which was someone doing business and had a better economical situation. So he was interested to give the best future for his child. And his child was a girl, and he wants the girl to study in the same school as other kids. So he wrote a letter, and for my surprise, it was published. So that means how influential he also was. And so we can read the letter and know what were the conditions at that time. So he says, the white schools, and I circulated because it's plural, they had globes, charts, competent teachers, note the plural, and those teachers would receive up to $900. And by contrast, he was saying, well, the black school, singular, is far away, and the teacher, only one teacher, receives about $200. And this teacher had never prepared someone that could qualify for a high school. So he was really fighting for the rights, and fortunately his daughter managed to study and everything. But that shows us that's not just, okay, we had schools, but the quality of schools were not the same. So that's important to think about how we end up where we are now, okay? Then here I need to mention, I will not go in depth in this, but we know, you certainly heard about the eugenic movement, which started maybe 1888. So even the studies in psychometrics and the attempt to understand cognitive skills. And I will just read, I will not comment, I will just read some sentences. So Lewis Terman says, their dullness seems to be racial, or at least inherent in the family stocks for which they come. Children of this group should be segregated into separate classes. And from a eugenic point of view, they constitute a grave problem because they're unusually prolific breeding. So these kind of ideas were, ideas was supporting all the segregation movement in the schools. So although in the United States, the Supreme Court declared that segregation was unconstitutional and tried to allow students to be in the same schools, having access to the same resources, It doesn't mean that because you have a law that it's in place or successfully implemented. So just to give a sense, 3 years later, you still see, and this is in the newspapers, so you still see students facing kind of protest when they are trying to go to the school to attend the classroom. And those two ladies, they are 84 and 83 years old, so they are alive, they are in this word. And Elizabeth Eckford on the left side, she was walking, and according to the newspaper, she was listening, lynch her, which means it's not just, I don't want you to study here, I'm frightened, your life is under threat. So it's really serious. And how can you emotionally be prepared for studying in this context? This image, I think, is well known. So it's Ruby Bridge. In fact, this moment was marked by a painting, which is nowadays in the White House, at least at the time of Barack Obama. I don't know if it's still there, but it was. So she was 6 years old, 18, again, pay attention to the dates. So still ongoing, this difficulty to have students studying the same space, even though the law was allowing this. And I must point here that I watched podcast in which Ruby Bridge was talking, and she was saying, yes, it was in the same school, but she was not in the same classroom. That's something that we don't hear all the time, right? So she had to have those marshals to escort her because of her safety and so on. So that's why we are in this moment now and celebrating Albert Cox. And why is this so important? So I think it's the first experience, the first sense of belonging. So yes, so first thing, when he was a student, he was allowed to participate on the Euclidean circle, which means that he was allowed to really discuss ideas with other professionals in the field, people prominent like Danzig and many others. But I remind you, and it was said yesterday as well, that in his transcripts where it was written colored, which means that when he was applying for a job, the first thing people would see, not his qualifications, but colored. So you see how difficult it would be to get a job in this context. And because I'm here always doing advocacy for women in STEM, of course, I must remind you that Euphemia Haynes was one of the initials, and of course, later, even later than Albert Cox. So it's always coming later for women. So the third part is about some critical factors that I would like to point out in the research. So today I'm only targeting mathematics anxiety because, of course, we are here in a community that is interested in mathematics and sharing this love for mathematics. So that's why I chose this topic rather than others. So I selected this sentence. I think it was mandatory to put someone from Jamaica. That's a joke. So he's half Jamaican, half British. So makes a lot of sense in this context. Also, another interesting thing is that his mother was a psychologist and his father was a mathematician, so it also makes sense. And he's an amazing journalist and writer, lots of interesting books, which I read and recommend. So in this talk, it was in 2012 Pop Tech conference, he said this, we have a scarcity of achievement in this country, and he was mentioning the United States. Not because we have a scarcity of talent, we have a scarcity of achievement because we are squandering our talent. So I think that's an important point to think about what's going on in the classrooms and in the families and in the environment that the child is growing. So in this paper by McClellan, she cites that, first of all, there are experiences of low expectations from some teachers and callous reactions of some teachers. So if a child is in a classroom and the teacher is not thinking, maybe in this classroom there is someone that will do something amazing for the humanity, then it's more difficult to grow, right? An overemphasis on fundamental and computational procedures. So yes, of course, you must learn the procedures and must put them in place, but sometimes the child reaches the right response and without knowing those aspects. And it's just, no, it's wrong because you should do in this way. So I think this rigid thinking sometimes is unhelpful. Based on all that I said before, so you may imagine that many parents, they might express and might show really indeed difficulties to do mathematics and perhaps to help the child in the homework or to see the value on what they are learning. Inadequate knowledge of Black achievement, and that's why today is so important, this event, and celebrating Albert Cox in this sense, and all other talents that are here today in this conference, which is the continuation. Belief in special talents are needed. So what I was saying before, if you see a classroom and you imagine that, well, they're just average kids with average future, and that's all, you want to do more for them. But if you even think for 1 second, oh, maybe the next genius is here, should I do something, right? Believe that mathematics is inherited rather than developed. So that's a very detrimental issue, the idea that, oh, you must born a genius, otherwise you don't stand a chance. And then a failure to properly train early years. And this is very detrimental because this is the source of mathematics anxiety in most cases. So just to bring some sense of reality, I brought this data from the House of Commons. It's a small briefing about Black students in England. So it's the most recent source I found. So this study shows different ethnic groups, so Asian, white, mixed, and other. And in comparison, in all those elements, we see that Black students, they are less likely to continue in their studies. So they also show that there are less students receiving first or upper second grade, second class degrees. And also not all of them are pursuing career, further studies and high skilled employment. So we need to think about this as well. And okay, imagine that they manage to do that. They go to academia, for instance, they try to do research and everything. So I found this data published on Science based on 83,000 of participants. And it shows that according to the bars on the left, the blue bar is the Black and African Americans. We see that they have on average 15% of chance to be successful in an NIH grant. While the other three groups, they will show above 25% of chance to get those grants. And then in the other study, 2018, here they just stratify to see if new applicants in comparison to experienced applicants, if they would be different. We still see, yes? Yeah, okay. You still see that they will show lower scores. So definitely it's difficult to find this. So I can stop here if you prefer.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. You can wrap. It's just time for questions.
Yes, yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Flavia. Questions? Any questions in the audience? Yeah.
Thank you. Where do formal diagnoses of dyscalculia fall into this?
Oh, thank you so much, because that's my biggest interest. So dyscalculia is an innate, apparently innate condition. So it child will, despite of having a good environment, good teachers, good schooling and everything, despite of including their own motivation, they will not be successful trying to learn mathematics. But it's not just the calculation that you learn at school, it's also activities that you do at home. So let's say it's really quantitative aspects, regardless of in general. So this is a condition like the same way as you have dyslexia, you have dyscalculia. And so, yes, that's something that it's really important to find alternatives for treatment. So far, there's no, let's say, it's something that you keep throughout life, but there are ways to improve or to make their learning experiences better. That's why we do research in this area. Like we have been doing studies with musical training or digital games. And recently we did TRNS, so transcranial brain stimulation. So there are some promising approaches for helping those students to improve. Yes.
So we have a question from the Zoom. What interventions are necessary to overcome maths anxiety, especially in children?
Yes, there are lots of studies trying to explore this. You can use basic interventions that are used in psychology for like cognitive-based behavioral therapy for those who are showing really, really strong levels of anxiety. So you can use relaxation, learning how to control your weight of breathing, and there are many ways to do those things. However, I must be very clear, based on research, even if you do an intervention that will reduce maths anxiety, it will not naturally or automatically improve maths performance. So you really need to do something for the maths and something for the anxiety, because if the child reduces the anxiety, it will the child will have better well-being, which is amazing and important. But then you need to also help them with the mathematics. And also approaches for improved confidence. So these are the ones.
So I have a question just from, so you have the score of maths anxiety, right?
Yes.
And then there's some data on sort of the average household income. So is there any correlation between this score and just household income to sort of delineate between sort of socioeconomic factors and also, you know, just to sort of delineate different.
Yes, if you look at the OECD data, they have all countries that are part of these studies. So
also within the country, right?
Yes, but you have data across the globe, and I didn't put today, but I usually put this big plot of this negative correlation between maths anxiety and maths performance. It's clear the pattern, and you see also clearly high income countries on the left side, so higher performance and lower maths anxiety. And on the other side, you see countries with low income with higher levels of maths anxiety. So poverty is indeed some of the factors influencing this, but we have other elements as well.
Okay.
I'm interested in what's the metric for maths anxiety? Because I saw that there's a kind of between 30, lower than 30 means not anxious, and above 30 means anxious. I just try and get a sense of how that measurement comes about.
Yes, so you do all the psychometrics, traditional psychometrics to reach that, but this is very difficult and to conclude, because although you can have someone with a very high level of maths anxiety, it doesn't necessarily translate with worse performance. We have high achievers. That's why it's important in the context of a class of mathematicians and other experts that use mathematics in some ways. So high achievers can also show higher levels of maths anxiety. And that means that for getting the threshold for clinical anxiety is something more complicated to be done, because if it's not detrimental for the individual in the long term, let's say you get very anxious, you don't sleep, you bite your nails, but in the class you go there and get a 10 score on a grade, so you relax and you are fine, and then you don't suffer from anxiety, you benefit from anxiety, right? But if you have a child that, on the contrary, is really suffering and is refusing to go to school and is refusing to go to class and is feeling really, it's hurting, then in that case, you need a treatment. So it's not just about the number in the scale. The scale is like a screening. You need to go beyond that and look at the child in a different way, in a more careful way, in the deeper way. We use this for research, basically.
But these, you've got psychometric.
Sorry, I have to leave.
Yeah.
Remaining discussion, however, interesting for the break. So let's thank Flavia again.